I'm saying a good living for what you would say the average person is. Now, I know that that changes from whether it's LA, Atlanta, DC, New York. But in just what do you think? Do you think it's there's a number you can put on it? And what I'm getting at is for so many years it was always about that six figures. Well, we already know that that whole six figure thing, it's been that for a long time. And when people started to mention six figures, it actually was a lot of money. Nowadays, I don't necessarily consider 100,000. It's certainly for those who have, student loan debt, all kinds of, fancy cars, a nice home. Certainly, if you bought the home recently, right? I just don't consider it to be as much as it used to be. So I just want to get your thoughts first on, what do you see as, a good living, and what your thoughts are on it. Sim, we'll start with you.
Man, in reference to the idea of a good living, man. Hold on. Can you guys hear me?
Hmm.
Oh man, I don't know what's going on with my screen. All right. Anyway, in reference to a good living, oh, I know what it is. I know what it is. All right. In reference to a good living, I think it has a lot to do with like your expenses, right? They say the whole idea of lifestyle creep could really just beat you up. I think that if you really master like the way that you spend your money when you don't make a whole lot of money, whenever you are making, let's say, when you go from $60,000 to $80,000, if you've mastered living at 60, but then when you go to 80, you're more prepared for you to be able to take those additional funds and deploy them towards something that's going to making you upwardly mobile. I just I don't understand I don't understand the notion of lifestyle creep as it pertains to just looking like I have money and not really having it. I'll tell you one thing that really triggered it for me about what I believe Dave Ramsey regarded to be a good number. I listened to his show way back in 2015 uh, religiously. And I remember whenever people were making $40,000, he would ask them questions. Hey, listen, we need to get your income up. We need to get your income up. And at the time in 2015, he was talking about $80,000 being the benchmark of what families need to have in place in order for them to start chucking away at their debt. And I have the inflation calculator pulled up right here, where it states that a dollar in 2015 is a dollar 30 today. So if we were to say 80,000 dollars in 2015 is $103,000 a year today. So I think it's doable. It's just a matter of how you're really spending it. Do you want to look like you have money, or are you actually putting yourself in position for you to actually use the money towards things that are going to benefit you in the future?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. How about you, intentional millionaire? What are your thoughts on it? All right, there we go.
Well, I think when it comes to income, I think a great number is 200,000, but I don't think people should stay there. But I think that's a great number. I think the key thing is not necessarily income that people really need to focus on. I think they need to focus on not owing everybody.
Hmm.
Um, I think because the income is a byproduct of how much debt you go out and get. So even when you think about a mortgage, that's still debt. It's good debt, but it's still debt. So I think before we really talk about income, I think people need to really make a decision on, okay, if I go make, let's just say at the low end, you're gonna make six figures at the low end. So let's just say 100,000. That 100,000 still gonna look different for somebody still making 100,000, but they don't have no debt. So I think I think when we come talk about income, income is a byproduct of how far you can extend your reach when it comes to business. When you think about leverage, however, I still think though, we have a culture now where we're so focused on the income that we forget about the income is just a extension of other areas that we really need to focus on. So but when if I was to say for a good living, where you can really make some things happen. I say 200K is a good start because even after taxes and you take care of all your basic expenses, if you're not living above your means, you can still have some money to left over to invest, save, and build emergency fund.
Good deal. Yeah. I think you make some really good I think you make some really good points there. My thought on that definitely I do think 200 is good. I think you can I obviously think the number can fluctuate. We all know that, but I do like what you say. It's really there's more factors there, right? And debt is such a big factors because a lot of times what we see is, so many people will be impressed with that six figures number, but the person will be up to their neck in debt. And you have someone who makes 80,000, you know, pretty much that just has the basic living expenses, we'll say car paid for, lives in maybe a modest apartment or bought a home, some time ago. They're looking at a whole different scenario. So, but yeah, I like that. And like you say, I believe that your income, it's just that's a means. It's just one way, right? So many people will maybe make 100,000, but they are making, but the investments are growing for them, and they're in a better state, right? So I definitely like that you point that out. Um, One thing on getting into the actual, the article, just so I can read the headline real quick. It says an economic divide that is widening. Almost a third of Americans earning 150,000 a year or more say they're living paycheck to paycheck, and many rely on credit cards to close the gap. So, just in that topic right there, credit cards are not closing any gap. It's just not. So we already know that that's not closing the gap. But I do understand what they're saying. It's obviously saying that they're trying to use that, to make it month to month. But let's face it, if you are relying on credit cards, well, you're really hurting yourself more, obviously, because you got that interest. But it's one of those things where I believe once people get into trouble, they don't even know, they have no clue where to turn, where to go from there. So something I do want to do is just bring the article up real quick. So this is the article, and when it comes to it, like I said, we're talking about 150,000 specifically today, but just know that that number's it's not easy to come by, right? When we're talking about 150,000. So, but you can still take this and understand based off of these numbers, whether it's 100,000, just know that a third of these individuals, right, are living paycheck to paycheck, which to me is pretty sad. But just to get further into the article, just to give you a little bit of the data, it says data from a June survey conducted by personal finance software company Quicken revealed that 32% of Americans earning at least 150,000 a year are currently living paycheck to paycheck, while 36% of folks earning 50,000 to 150,000 and 55% of households earning less than that reported the same. So let me get you all's initial take. Sim, when you hear that, what comes to mind when you just hear? Do you hear that? Do you when you hear that, what comes to mind? Is your initial thought? Is your initial thought? I'm not surprised because of the way things have changed, or still in today's climate, are you saying, what a shame? How ridiculous?
You know, a third is a sizable amount. That I'd say the numbers might be probably closer to. I'd say that the numbers, yeah, it's probably a little bit more than a third. I mean, I'd say that people who make six figures and all the way up to millionaire status are caught up in the same exact grind. And the grind is lifestyle creep. They want to look like they have money. They want to stay in the high-rise apartments. They want to drive a nice car. They want to have this travel lifestyle, and then they want to be able to go to nice restaurants. You know, I think that there's all these opportunities and experiences. You know, some people say, you know, like I'll pay for experiences. I mean, I understand that, you know, I might not be able to experience these later on in life. Putting off being in position today puts you in a detrimental situation going into the future. You know, if people can buckle down when you are making the six figures and to say, hey, listen, I'm going to sit in the house, I'm not going to do anything, and I'm going to buckle down and go to work and get this debt off my back, and then I'll be in position to go ahead and be on the upside, because there's no way credit cards could be the supplement to you not making enough money, because we're talking about 29-30% interest. Come on, I mean, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, absolutely. What about you, intentional millionaire? When you first think about that, what's your first thought? Do you think that there's any bit of that that's acceptable due to the way that the climate has changed, or do you still think it's just, bad habits that have just continued on, basically?
Oh, you're muted, Tim.
Oh yeah, you made it.
Sorry about that. I
It's all right.
think it's some of both, actually. I think one is lack of bad habits, because the problem for me is, first thing is, I think that shows that people didn't really learn nothing from the COVID situation. So that's the first thing, because you would think when we was, they was creating stimulus type programs and positions. I think that was the rare case opportunity in the economy that people really had a great come up. However, I think a lot of it was false, because it took some time, and now we in the era where, for all of those people that won and came up from an income perspective, I think it really exposed that they really didn't have the financial education that they thought they had. But also too, I think it also exposed that they really didn't have the skill sets to maintain whatever they was doing. So I think that it's some of both. Because how is it now? When you think back, before we had the shift in the equity markets in real estate, it was a great time that people can actually get a good come up if they have been preparing. But now, because people didn't they did a poor job preparing for the opportunity come up, and we are starting to see, because of that, that they really was just living a life based off of the fad of the moment, the fad of the economy.
Right.
Because now it's like you're exposed. It's like, the tide went out, and now it goes to show you was swimming naked. So, so that's really what I think.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think I think a lot of it, for me, I mean, I think you guys hit the nail on the head. These are bad habits that people have had, and they didn't seize the opportunity, at the time that they could have. Um, I mean, you think about it. We went through all this with the pandemic. You had stimulus, you had all of that. Does anybody have any of that stimulus money? Does anybody have any of it to show for it? And maybe it wasn't a ton, but do people have any money to show for it at all? And I would say they probably don't, so for me, that's one thing. And then I just think, in the grand scheme of things, when you talk about, much like the cycles go, right? We go, whether it's boom and bust cycles, I think people go through boom and bust cycles as well, right? Like, people literally don't change their habits. They're whenever they have it, they're doing good. They're not putting away, like a squirrel that's putting it away for worse times. People just in general do not do that. And of course, here on YouTube, we see a lot of big talk and all that. But if you notice, the big talk, when times get tough, the big talk does get a little more quiet. It's not as, it's not as boisterous. And a lot of people seem to do good at one time, and then a lot of people seem to do, not as good at at one time. And I think we're headed for I do think we're headed for worse times. Something else the article says, it says, Quicken found that 46% of higher income groups are more dependent on their credit cards than they've ever been. So just looking at that right there, right? That shows you that many of these people, although they went through the financial crisis, still back in the very same trouble that they had previously been in. So it just goes to show you that people just don't learn their lesson. And something else that I do want to point out, because I don't have the statistic, but something that guys, that I did see was, right now it's anticipated that really, a lot of people think that these issues are because of the housing situation, in terms of, now rents have went up, right? But in terms of people going out and getting houses they shouldn't have got. But from everything I've seen, the numbers are still pretty low on that. For the most part, it does seem a lot of people stayed where they were at. They didn't go moving. But I think we're going to see some of that flesh out probably a little more over the next, maybe the next year or so. So, but I do think when you start to account for those that did go ahead, get them a home that probably shouldn't have, you're going to see, and it may not be a massive amount, but you're still going to see um, some more trouble coming. Because let's face it, if you're depending on credit cards to get you by, you're in trouble. I mean, there's just no getting around that. So I think that's important. What do you guys, if you guys could point out, Sam, I'll start with you. If you could point out just three direct factors, and it can be from the way people are raised, anything you want it to be, three direct factors that have led to this direct problem, right? This money issue, whether it's education, whatever, the cost of education. What would you say is those three reasons, the three main reasons that people have ended up like this in this situation?
In my opinion, I think a lot of it has to do with them living a humble life growing up. I think that the idea of overcompensation is usually bred from people who didn't have it when they were young, and so they have to overcompensate going into the future, and they have to do things that put them in a financial bind. I mean, it's that, and then it's also lack of preparation going into the future. I question a lot of people who don't prioritize retirement planning and planning for the future. And then the last part is this general ignorance. People who choose not to be knowledgeable about their finances. I mean, there are people who vehemently told me, I have a spreadsheet that I'm working on coming out with, and they vehemently told me I'm not interested in tracking my finances because I don't want to have to face my current situation on a numbers level. I'd much rather just keep on getting by. And these are people who are higher income earners. So I think it's those three things that I've seen to be the real drivers about like the identity, what they should be doing, and the role that they choose to take on going forward.
Yeah, I think those are great points. Very good points, man. Intentional. What do you say? Three factors that have the three biggest factors in your opinion that have led to, this this direct issue that where people can't get by and people live in check to check. Hey, you're muted.
I say one, lack of education. And I think that lack of education is at all levels, meaning the individual themselves, regardless if you consider yourself adult, you have a driver license and you work. And so I think that's one. I think the second one is they wasn't taught based on their upbringing, and also the environment. So I think I think that all falls under one. I think two, distractions. I think this social norms and the social infrastructure has too many people distracted from the priority stuff they need to be paying attention to. And then number three, I think is most people just immature. I hate to say it, but I think finances is a area where is some level of maturity that's involved, because it forces you, if you don't know, you have to go learn. I think it forces you to, if you don't know or didn't have the upbringing or education, then it's up to you to figure it out. And I think that it's easier to always talk about what you don't have versus going out and seeking the heat to have it for yourself. So those are the three things that I think the reason why where we at when it comes to people and finance.
Yeah, I think so I agree with you 100%. I think those are excellent points. Something else. So as far as I'm concerned, like the three things I think a part of it is cultural, right? I think there are cultural aspects that do set people back to begin with. But now when we're talking about, let's just think about, I think that sets them off in the wrong direction, right? But for the group that's making this type of money, there's no excuse. The culture should have no bearing on what you make in your 30s and 40s. So I think it sets people in that direction. But if the culture still got you running out, like, getting a car you can't afford, that's a you probably has nothing to do with the culture by that point, right? It's one thing if it's like, 18, 20, early 20s maybe, but at some point you got to come out of that. So there's really no excuse for that. I think lack of education, just from a standpoint of, there's no reason why at the high school level you shouldn't be really learning about how banking works, how to budget, and really learning about compound interest, and simple books. I mean, whether Rich Dad Poor Dad, just different things like that. If they require them at the high school level, it would change a lot. But now, of course, why do they not do that? Well, as a society, being in debt, right? I mean, it keeps people working, it keeps the economy going. So, but it doesn't make any sense at all. And then I think the other reason, and I think it was you, Sim, you may have touched on it, because you're talking about the spreadsheet. I genuinely think people, once they get down that path, they do not want to know what the numbers suggest, because there comes some point in time, and let's face this is everything, right? I would imagine if you weigh 350, you're not going to want to get on the scale, because at some point, if you want to get back down to 175, you're going to have to come to reality with, okay, this is where I'm at, and this is where I got to get to, and it's a daunting task for a lot of people. So, I think that's a lot of it is people would rather bury their head in the sand, but what happens is it haunts you and it keeps on coming up over and over. So you eventually start 10 years later than you should have. And then you run into the problem where, okay, it's retirement. Now you want to get serious. And I'm not going to say it's too late, but it certainly does get harder. So that's one thing to think about. So something I do want to point out, because a big thing about this, right, at its core, this is about debt, hands down. I mean, I think it's really easy to see that. I don't care where you live in America. You make 150,000, you got no debt, you ain't got no problems. It is
Right.
what it is. Even if you honestly, you can have kids, and you don't have no debt, you're fine. So this really does come down. The debt, and just understanding that people need to stop. People always find a way to do what they want to do, because they want to justify it, right? Oh, well, my kids need to go to private school. Well, if you can't afford it, they don't need to. It's that's just how it has to be. But people, if they would handle that debt the same way, and as we talked earlier, I think it comes down to, why do people feel the need after every raise to scale up. Every single raise they scale up. Me, I'm the opposite because I'm the opposite. I almost scale down every raise. You know why? Because I don't want to get deeper and deeper. I want to get closer to that point where, just do what I want. So that's the reason why I kind of always looked at it, have looked at it different. And if I'm going to make a big purchase or really spend, to me, it's going to be a cash purchase where I can consider it, hey, I took that loss already. It's for pleasure or whatever. I took the loss, but I don't owe nobody for it, because a lot of times that's when it can become a nightmare for you. And that's whether it's a house, a car, whatever the case is. So I did want to touch on it because debt is such a big part of it. I thought it'd be, very important to touch on, just to touch on the debt aspect. So right here, as you can see, and I'm just showing the makeup of, the top sources of personal debt. And this right here has credit cards 28%. To me, that's crazy. I mean, just think about the interest rate people are paying, on that. Car loans, 12%. And this is crazy. When I first started listening to, Dave Ramsey, now this is nearing 20 years ago now. Not quite, but this is nearing 20 years ago. It's at least probably been about 16 or 17. Because I did Financial Peace University. When I initially started listening to him, in his book, he talks about the average car payment at that time. I can't remember. It might have been pushing 400. I'm pretty sure it's up to like 700 now. And it is crazy. So if people only understood what holding that type of payment does to you, and people are holding it for 30, 40 years because they just go and get another one, right? And here's the crazy thing about that is there's so many unique ways to me that people can have those nice things, but just wait their time. So for example, we have people in debt. You have people who get $15,000 back on their taxes every year. So why I don't recommend it if you're in debt, but I would not recommend that. You need to pay the debt off. But even for those who just have to be seen, if you put the tax money away, right, over several years, you've got 60 grand to go, really put down on something. So if you want to floss and that's what you want to do, right, at least it'd be paid for. But no, people don't do that. They get it, they pay off a little bit of debt, but then they go out and spend it and they talk themselves into saying, hey, I deserve this. I've worked hard for this, but they're in debt, So, but yeah, I just wanted to mention that. But something else on as far as the debt, medical debt, 7%, home equity loans, lines of credit, 6%, personal education loans, 5%. I would have thought that would have been higher, but maybe it's not higher because I know they said personal education loans. Now, I don't know if that does include, well, yeah, I guess it would. I was thinking federal or private, but it probably does. Let's see, educational expenses for children or family members, 3%. So you can clearly see where a lot of this is having its bearing on the issue. And I'll just read this real quick. The takeaway: Americans are making consistent progress when it comes to paying off their debts. Now, this says, right, according to the survey, even reducing what they owe over the course of a period of historic inflation. While the report didn't explore how Americans are paying down debt, the data shows that average debt per individual declined the most by $6,475 between 2019 and 2021. Now, that would suggest, right, that some people did pay off their debt during during the pandemic. And I would suspect, I don't know if some of this would some way be tied to equity. I don't know, because equity is still, what I think is for those who did sell a home, I would say that some of those who did sell homes probably did pay down some of their debt and stuff like that, because the equity had went up, had went up by so much. But then it says during those early pandemic years, many workers grew their savings. Now, we did see that happen. We did see where savings were obviously growing. The money kept on getting counted, and I didn't even feel like that money was a lot of money personally, the stimulus money. But we did see that where people were actually kind of doing some savings. But to me, the housing issue now is starting to reverse course on that. So let me know, Sim, what's the first thing that someone needs to do? And I know it's kind of tough to pin it down to one thing, but someone who is, let's just keep it simple and say we've got someone single. We'll keep it very simple, making 150,000 and they're paycheck to paycheck. What's the first piece of advice you're going to give them in terms of, I want to be clear, not say now, obviously some debt, I'm sure debt pay down has, in terms of where that person can even start. What are your thoughts on where that person should start or how they should start? Even if is it Dave Ramsey? Is it, what is it, the fire community? What is it that they should do to start when they're coming to grips with, hey, I'm screwed here, basically?
That's a good question, man. I went through even a similar situation recently as I was working on this spreadsheet, and I was actually doing exactly what I would suggest someone do, is to sit down, track all of your expenses. Now, your banking institution more than likely gives you, I hope you guys can hear me. Your banking institution more than likely gives you a CSV format of all your transactions, right? And you can go back to your pay stubs, and then you can download all of those transactions and create a system where you can really have a good idea of your financial situation. What I call it is getting naked with your finances, right? It's where you take off all the layers and you just come to grips with the situation that you're in. And then you start figuring it out. Okay, this is where I'm at today. This is my starting point. This potentially could be the lowest and the worst situation that I could find myself in. And then that in turn, over time, you can potentially put yourself in a better situation. Now, the one specific outside influence that I really learned a lot from was Dave Ramsey. And Dave Ramsey helped me out through his show, and it allowed other people to be the case studies, almost a situation where I could put myself in the caller's situation and say, hey, if I was calling Dave and this was my circumstance, how would he discuss it with me? And essentially breaks it down. Okay, how much is the household income, right? How much debt do you all have? How many children do you all have? What baby step are you all on? And once you really start understanding the language that's associated with his platform, what he does a really good job of is he just ends up reducing all of the different steps that are involved in a process, and it allows you to really start understanding the questions you should be asking yourself. I need to do this. I need to do that. I need to do this. I think that's a very good place to start. Now, I'm working on a spreadsheet myself, and it's a little bit tricky because not all banking institutions output the same information. The tool I would like to start providing to people is a tool where you can track your income, you can track your expenses, you can track your savings, you can track any potential side work, side business income or associated costs that might come into your balance sheet. I think that is important for you as an adult. Like, I think that's like professional level adulting, when you can understand your finances. And it doesn't even really have to be a full-blown like projection or a budget. Just understand how the transactions took place. I went to Chick-fil-A And on this day, this was my balance before I went there. This is my balance afterwards. And then I had these other associated expenses prior to me receiving my next paycheck, whatever, whatever.
Man, great points. Great points. Intentional millionaire. And just in a second, I'm gonna let intentional millionaire go, and then I'm just gonna address the chat real quick. We'll see what's happening in the chat. Intentional. What's your thoughts as far as where someone should start? They have no clue where to start. They know they have an issue. Where do they begin? Should it be a book? Should it be turn on a channel on TV to get the information? What is it, or where can someone start to dig themselves out the hole?
I would say Sim hit that dead on the head. I would say Dave Ramsey is definitely a good start.
Right.
But also I think picking up a book. Think picking up a book or getting on YouTube and researching some videos on whatever area you feel you don't have insight on, or whatever financial terms you may have heard that does not make sense to you. I think you have to do the due diligence.
Right.
Because to me, going back to your point, I think when you mentioned about how people at 150,000 in income and they don't necessarily want to see the numbers. See, that goes back to I think that's a great example of they want to be immature. Because to me, it doesn't make sense if you put the work in to make that type of income. Why wouldn't you also want to do the work to try to maintain and keep or grow or leverage that income? So to me, that's just a lack of maturity. It's just one of those things where you can't throw a rock and then hide your hands.
Yeah. Yep.
so
Absolutely.
so I think Dave Ramsey is a good start. I think reading a book. I think you need to do both in sync. I don't think you need to do one before the other. Because I think we're in an era now, this methodical way of doing things, I think it helps, but I think we have to understand that we got to do multitasking to do things, because I think we got to do it with the end goal in mind. That's
Right.
my thing. Because I don't think there's no problem with anybody at any I don't think it's no problem with anybody based on where they need to start at. I think it's just all about what do you want for you?
Right.
And then what path are you going to carve out to get whatever you're looking for? I think that's really the key, because the thing about finance that I enjoy the most is no one size fit all. It's just what path do you take? Some paths is faster than others. Some paths may be a little bit more challenging. However, but the end goal really can be the same. And I think that's the great thing about finance. And also the great thing about finance is you'll find it's really just about the person that does the best due diligence. But then after you do the due diligence, you have to take action. And I want to repeat that, because even if you go through Dave Ramsey or even if you read a book, if you don't start taking action right then and start implementing the tools in your toolkit, it's not going to matter anyway. It's just like if you have a brand new car and you don't have the keys to that car, it doesn't matter about the new leather smell in the car, because you will never drive it. You don't have the keys to it. So that's what I think most people should do. And I think I just want to address it from this level, and I'll be and I'll be done on this topic, at least from my perspective. I think that one of the things that when you think about, I think we got to look at across the spectrum. So if you married a significant other, that's going to look different than someone single. And then if you young and starting out, that's going to look different for someone that may have been in the market a little bit more seasoned. So I think we just can't take and do one size fit all. I just think you need to really identify what's going to work for you based on the type of outcome that you're looking at. So I just really want to address that, because even somebody older, their outlook and their needs and wants and things of that nature are going to be a little bit different. So just really want to address that, because when you're talking about when you know, two people marry and you talk about finances, that could be a very tricky and sensitive dynamic depending on the backgrounds of the two individuals. So I definitely just wanted to mention that.
So I think you make some excellent points. Something that I really want to point out, and then like I said, we'll address the chat real quick. Is yeah, part of it is just it's just people needing to grow up. Like you said, I mean, when it comes to people not wanting to know the truth or wanting to look at it, the truth is it's a lot easier when you do know. Because when you look at it, the thing about the budget is when you have a budget together, um, let's just say that you put in there, let's just say you put in there $50 a month to eat at Chick-fil-A, right? Well, here's the thing. When you budget and you spend less in one category, well, then you can move it over. So you can move the stuff over. But that's the best thing, because when you do budget like you need to, you know the truth and you know what you can do. And the sad part is like I said about the taxes earlier, you got people that got tax money back. They know that their tires are bald as shack. Yet they set none of that money aside, as if those tires aren't going to start to pop or aren't going to go bad. Like, within 3 months, you're going to have to put tires on, and you got $8,000 and you don't put none of that aside. And then 3 months down the road, or you're in trouble and you got no emergency fund, and it just doesn't make any sense at all. So just from a standpoint of being able to project ahead, it's just so much easier and so much less stress when you do it that way, because you plan things, because you do plan things out. So I think a lot of it just comes down to people, honestly. You really got to grow up and start to actually look at what you got going on with your finances and take hold of it. So, and as far as, where should one start? Yeah, I don't think there's an answer that's just that easy. I don't think you can just say, "Hey, do this or that." I do think there's some books you can look at, obviously, but ultimately, I think the biggest thing is making the decision that you no longer want to continue going down that road that you have been. And understand, when we talk about $150,000, this amount of money is a far cry over what the average person is making. So you will have people making half that amount that are living quite a bit better because they're not up to their neck in debt. So I think it's worth pointing that out. Now let's go real quick. Let's take a look at the chat and see what we got going on.
Hey, let me say one last thing. I
Yeah,
heard, I want to say I heard it yesterday, today. I don't know. My days are blurred. Right? There was a runner. He said that one of the three things that he does in order, he's a Kenyan guy. That's all I know. He's a Kenyan guy. And he was been asked this question. He had like three things that he does in order for him to prepare for a race. And one of the things that he said was, he says you have to get some vitamin N. And vitamin N is your ability to tell people no. Once you master your ability to tell people no, I think that's going to put you in a really good situation to be able to propel yourself into the places that you want to go into, because it doesn't matter how much preparations that you're making if you don't have the ability to say, hey, listen, it's not in my budget. It's not in my budget. It's not in my budget. Just creating that ability to be able to turn down the temporary enjoyment for them to put you in position for future opportunities down the road.
Yeah, man, that's a great point. Sim, I've done that a lot. Like, someone about, hey, you trying to go eat? Nah, I ain't got it. Nice. Well, it's because that budget category I don't. So I'm not. It's easy. It is what it is. I don't have it there. Now, could I move it around or whatever? Yeah, but to me, it's just easy. It's money I don't need to spend. So you know what I mean, or I don't want to spend. So yeah, I think that's I think that's a great point. I think it's an excellent point that you make. Excellent point. OG Patrice, greetings and salutations. She said that earlier. It's been a little while. Earlier, so sorry. I'm just now getting caught up. Interest. Let's see. Interest rates. Damn near 8%. Yeah, and that is crazy. It is crazy. But now, what I always hear, and I I do have a real estate license, so I do hear agents say back in the 80s, they remember when it was, I think they said around 18%. So to be honest, we just got used to rates that were crazy low. That's not really the norm, 2 and 3%. So but that 8% though is definitely crazy. And see, even to this though, and as crazy as it sounds, when I think about 8%, I'm always thinking I'm gonna find a way to get what I need or what I want down the road, regardless, right? So it's all about setting yourself up in that position. So when I see something like 8%, we'll just use a $500,000 home just to keep it simple. When I see something like 8%, where back in the day people are like, man, 2%, not a problem. Well, for me, I'm thinking, okay, if I want that home, then I need to find a way to put 200,000 down on it, because I'm still going to find a way to get the home. It's just I got to find a way that makes more sense, because I want to keep that payment to something reasonable, because I'm not about to be a house poor. So it just means a bigger down payment. It may mean, hey, if you just feel you got to have the truck, you can't get it, then okay, then you need to find a way to put 20,000 down on a $40,000 truck. You really need to find a way to have it paid off in cash. But there are different ways to arrive there. But people have gotten this mentality of just do the minimum. The bank says I can get it if I put $2 down and a pack of gum. So that's what I'm going to do and get it. And no, you can't afford it. Because see, people keep on letting the bank tell them what they can afford. You can't afford it. Like, you can't. You were just struggling last week to feed your kids, and all of a sudden now you get on the lot and you can get this truck and you have no issue. I mean, it's so a lot of it is just about people taking control of their own life and saying, because let's face it, even for all those out there in YouTube, I know everybody's rich, but when you turn the camera off, whether you can afford it or not. You can't. And some of them, the phones they're on look dusty. So they're not doing that well. You know what I'm saying? So it's like you got to look in the mirror, and there's nothing wrong with admitting, hey, I can't do that right now. But if I play my cards right and do what I need to do, I'll get there. So that's what's important, is just people at some point you gotta like I said, you gotta get on the scale. You want to lose weight? We need to know where you're starting at. You have to do that. And if you won't do that, you keep on burying your head, you're not going to get there. You're going to keep on arriving at the same point. So yeah, I just want to point that out. Let's see. Said it's been a while at the Intentional Millionaire. Man, it has been a while, hasn't it? Since we've been able to get on. Peter Investor M, salute to you. Yeah, I'll enjoy doing these streams, man, because it's just cool to get to talk about the different things that are going on. And so much time, so much when I see stuff, it's just so much faking going on, which is just crazy, because what people don't understand, the more you make, this stuff happens it doesn't matter how much money you have. There are times when even Jay-Z says, nah, probably don't need to do that right now, because we're trying to do this. It doesn't matter how much money you have. Anyone who's smart with their money isn't just going out saying, I'll take that, I'll take that, because you won't have it very long. So even if you're a billionaire, these billionaires understand that, because we just saw it happen, that net worth can drop to about 400 million real quick. So they understand that there's ebbs and flows to this, and it's a cycle. So many, especially people who don't have anything, think it's just this thing of, appearing to have it and flossing. But there comes a time where everybody, regardless of how much money you have, has to find a way to cut back or do whatever. And those people who have it are always in prep. always in preparation for that next cycle, whether it's good or bad, to find the way to capitalize on it. It's always about finding the way to capitalize, whether the market's good or whether the market's bad. That's what it's always about. But people don't understand that. And the fakers just keep faking. And it's like, people know you don't have it. You're not fooling anyone.
Can I just add this to what you just shared in
Yeah, absolutely.
The comment about the interest rate?
Yeah,
See, it's not interest rate that people really should be focused on. I think people really should be focused on, are you going to be prepared when the market shifts? Even if it's 10 years from now. See, because if you prepare, what people have to know, regardless of income, when you prepare, you always going to have opportunities come across your desk. It's when you're not prepared because you're not in the right mind space to take advantage of the see or be able to identify opportunities that's in front of you. See, and I think that's the bigger issue, because going back to the topic at hand, people making 150,000 still living paycheck to paycheck. See, they making an income, but because they're financially strapped, when opportunities come, they can't do anything.
Yep.
So you will always stay in the hamster wheel of doing the same things over and over and over, because you never put yourself in position where you can leverage when the opportunities come and it presents itself. Because just like it's 8% interest right now, that don't mean all deals still is at 8%. And still, you got other type of ways that you could do financing. It does require a little bit more understanding of, real estate, or understanding of alternative type of investments. And that's not for everyone. However, but if you put yourself in position, then you have the additional resources and a discretionary income, then it could be a no-brainer for you. So I think that's just something we really got to identify with, because I think the challenge I see that most people are doing right now is you use the media not from a scare tactic perspective, but use the media for a perspective of telling yourself, how can I prepare for the next wave, whatever that may be? And I think that should be that should give you a better outlook and a better conversation.
Yeah, man. I think those are excellent points, man. I think those are excellent points. I think like you said, it's all about opportunity and being able to seize, the opportunity at the right time. And that's why, it's like, even, hey, you got a little cash. And when I say cash, I just mean really just money that you can access quickly. That's how you get a deal, right? There's a reason why pawn shops exist, right? Because they're ready to jump on a deal, and they're always ready to get the deal when someone comes in, so then they can in turn flip it to someone else who's in position. So I think that's a great point, because I always say about, certainly on the investing end, I don't care if the interest rate is 75%. What do the numbers say? What does the cash flow? I mean, can you afford it? What do the numbers say? Because at the end of the day, you can always refinance. There's other stuff, but you got to always be looking at how you can take advantage when the opportunity comes. So, man, that's a very good point. Very good point, intentional millionaire, that you make there. So Wally Verse says, yo, and we appreciate everybody, definitely for watching the content. We really appreciate it, as always. And also Wally Verse says, salute to the finance bros. And salute right back at you. Let's see. We've got Facts and the Uncomfortable Truth with Bernard S.
Salute, bro.
Salute. Absolutely. Let's see what else we got. See, Sim shouting out back to Peter Investor M. Peter Investor M has been around a while, man. Always coming up. We always appreciate definitely appreciate the support. We always do, man. It means a lot to us. Got a friend right here, Wealth Engineering.
Yo,
The crew is back. Yeah, absolutely, man. Absolutely.
hey, we got a spot for you right here, man. We got a spot for you.
Yeah, we absolutely do. We absolutely do, man. Wealth Engineering has been up with us, many a times, just talking finance and what's going on. And honestly, while we get on the panel and talk, it really, you really do have to live it, because things are changing so much. You really have to stay locked in. Stuff shifts so quickly. You can quickly have no clue what's going on if you don't, if you don't really stay on top of things. So no, absolutely. And so, yeah.
Hey, let me say this real quick about Wealth Engineering. Hey, remember when we came over there to your channel, man, and he said something to us? He said, man, the dollar's under attack, man. We don't know if the dollar's gonna be on top like it's been over the years.
I remember that. I sure do.
Man, we didn't believe you, man. We didn't believe you. But yeah, I mean, a lot of the stuff, Wealth Engineering, he kept his ear to the streets, man. And check out his channel. Wealth Engineering has some really, really good information. So
definitely check out his channel for sure. Absolutely.
He told us about a lot of the stuff that's happening right now. We were talking about it at least 2 years ago, at least.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And by the way, I was listening to some stuff about China, because a lot of people thought China would overtake, but that's a whole nother topic. But China's got a lot of issues going on. They're not going to be overtaking the dollar anytime soon. It won't be them. Maybe somebody won't be China, just based on they've got a lot of issues. They put so much money into infrastructure in terms of just to really facilitate it wasn't even so much about growth, but more so about stimulating the economy. And now there's literally places in China where there's like, it's just completely empty. There's literally whole buildings empty, just sitting around. There's not even people to basically live there. So they've got a whole nother problem where they're going to have to figure out how they stimulate, and it can't be done the way it was previously. So that's something we'll talk about. As well. And I think it's important to remember when it does come to money, right? Even in the room, right? Like sometimes it's not, even with America, right? And their troubles and woes with money, which there definitely are. Sometimes, certain places are bullies, right? So there's a lot of stuff attached to the money that makes it deep. But yeah, I definitely always enjoy our conversations with Wealth Engineering, and I know he would be interested in debating some more for sure. So absolutely. Let's see. So one thing right here real quick, Wealth Engineering said, how is it in my area? Have I noticed a slowdown? And I'm assuming he's probably talking about just in general, whether it's real estate, the whole nine. Yeah, there's definitely been a drop off. If you're talking about real estate, yeah, there's definitely been there's been a little bit of a slowdown, but there still is a problem. The thing about this is people keep on saying, and have been saying throughout this whole thing, man, it's going to get back like 2008. It's so different than that point in time, right? The issue now, 2008, it was supply was the issue. It's still, at the end of the day, you got to look at supply and demand. So this artificial problem caused in 2008, which was just ratchet, there's no other way to put it. This artificial problem, well, people started losing their homes, right? So at the same time, people start losing their homes. So, okay, people lose their homes. What happens? Well, supply is starting to go up. Banks aren't giving out loans. So even if demand, right, per se, hasn't changed, Well, it is changed by force because you can't get a loan to get it. So you had supply, going up and demand going down. And then on top of that, you had people, because the values dropping, where the demand was dropping because they didn't want to touch houses with a 10-foot pole. So all this was about supply. Now we have a problem where the interest rates are going up, but there's not enough supply. There's not enough supply for homes. And that's why we're not seeing these big drops because it's just, you got to have supply. The supply on the market would have to go up, or a change in demand, rapid change in demand, just for the money to switch up. So that's where people are waiting on this great big drop. I don't see it. I don't see it, based off of they can't build enough homes fast enough. So as long as that happens, doesn't mean we won't see some little changes, because I have seen that, and I have seen prices start to drop some, which will happen because of the interest rates. But in the grand scheme of things, as long as there's a supply problem, we're not getting 2008 again. It's just not going to happen. So I want to point that out. But yeah, it has slowed down in my area some, for sure. So then right here, let's see. A deal is a deal at 12% or 8%. And I 100% agree with this. I just purchased an investment property at 11%. Thank you, Orlando Miner. Oh, shout out to Orlando Miner, man. He's doing his thing, man. I like to see people do their thing, man. Check out his channel for sure, man. Orlando's doing his thing.
For sure.
But let's see. Caramel Drip. You're live again. Hello.
Oh yeah, she's talking about me, because it's my second time today.
Oh, okay. That's what's up. Oh, you live today?
Oh yeah, I went live earlier this morning. Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
I didn't realize that. Okay, cool.
Listen, we gotta. It's a fourth quarter. We gotta eat out here.
I hear you, man. I hear you. So yeah, I just wanted to point out, some of you all in some of your comments and stuff. But yeah, I think I think overall, when we look at this $150,000, just to me, the grand scheme of this, $150,000 is zero reason you should be living check to check. Period. There's no reason at all. It doesn't make sense at all. But if you are, at least you have, hopefully, right? Usually, bigger income, bigger debt a lot of times, but at least you have a venue, because that is the thing. If you are making 150,000, you do have a skill. And if you're doing it and you're not scamming, you have a skill, right? So that's a good thing, and you're gonna have to continue using that skill to try to dig yourself out. So that's the one thing about that certain, income bracket, if you will. And I'm gonna show something just real fast, just to put that in perspective. Let's see. Oh, this would help maybe put things in perspective in terms of how much. Right here is median earnings by age in the United States. So age 16 to 19, right? 31,000, and I'm just going to round just to make it easy. Let's say 31,000, 20 to 24, 38,000, 25 to 34, 52,000, 35 to 44, 63,000, 45 to 54, 64,000, 55 to 64, 63,000, and 65 years and up. Of course, at that point in time, because of people retiring, it takes a drop off. That would be 65,000. So what they're saying at your peak, in between 45, and I'm glad to know I'm not there yet. So that means I'm going to keep moving up. I got plans to move up regardless, though. But 45 to 54, just under 65,000. So I wanted to point that out because it does show that, in terms of the numbers, I wanted to point that out because these are the average. So when we're talking about 150,000, I mean, it's a far cry from this amount. So it does show you if these are the averages, and by no means should you be trying to be average, but it should still show you within this group of people, because as we saw, those numbers tend to be around the same. So there's a lot of people making way less, not living check to check. That means you messed up and you got to fix it. So just think about it. And that you should feel bad about. I mean, you should. If you literally got people making half of what you do or a third, and they're not living check to check, you're living beyond your means. It's that simple. So when I say feel bad, you should feel bad if you decide to stay there. None's wrong with it, acknowledging that you made some mistakes along the way and fixing it. But if you decide to stay there, then yeah, you should feel bad about that. Guys, what's your take on it? You have any take on it?
Well, I say first thing is I don't believe those numbers because everybody on YouTube is making 6 figures plus. So
I hear you, man.
Everybody's 6 figures plus. Everybody millionaires, and
right.
So I don't know, man. These numbers ain't right according to YouTube.
I feel you, man. Everybody's balling, man. But when you start to ask questions about what they do or what time they do it at, then it gets silent. Because if you're making it, you got to go out and get it. So it don't come easy, stuff like that. So absolutely, man. But yeah, I think this is just another interesting thing, especially right. I think was our last topic, UPS drivers.
Mm-hmm.
So I just think and that was around 150, wasn't it? With total compensation, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's just very interesting though. It's very interesting overall, but I think the biggest problem is people just simply, they just keep on living outside of their means. It's as simple as that. That's what this comes down to. That is what this comes down to. Anything else you guys can think of, or any thoughts that you all have overall on just the finance world, what's going on, that you guys want to touch on?
I would say that I just think people really need to go back and just really consider, what do you want financially? I think putting income aside, because I think in this era now, we're so focused on income that we're missing the real goal. I'm gonna be honest with you, at least for me. I think income is part of it. But if you don't have a plan for the income, I still think you're just going to be no different than somebody that does not make as much, but they're a better steward of the lesser income that they have. I'm just one to believe that, because I know people that make, in the mid 6 figures that they just not a good steward of money. And the only thing that they're doing is just, they're just allowed to I like to say, have a better visual lifestyle, but they have more of a headache when you close the doors and they're stressing about all the bills. Because I think people need to start really associate income with how much level of stress do you want to have, but also with income, how much are you willing to compromise your health for? So I think that income is part of it, but I think we got to really dive deeper and see what do we really mean by income. Now, if you say you want to make, 300,000, but 300,000, you're going to make the income, but you're going to use that income to stay up on your medical, be able to make sure your family have the proper medical care. You're not going to skimp on if you feeling really bad, calling the ambulance because you worried about paying the ambulance bill. You're not going to do those things because you're going to utilize the income to give you a full gamut of your life. Meaning you're going to use that income to have better health. You're going to use that income to, if you want to grow or foster your spirituality, you're going to use that income so you can put money back into your mentals if that may be off. See, I think we get so caught about income, but we only focus on income for stuff. And it's not productive stuff. It's just crap that doesn't equate to the bottom line or the actual goal that we're looking for. So I think that's really what the conversation should be. But we're so caught in the American way of doing things I think the income has become the new carrot that they dang in front of people, because people keep going for income, but they never have a plan. So that goes back to your point, Perry, of, your point and Sim's point of lifestyle creep. See, because lifestyle creep is not bad if you're taking care of all the basic core fundamental things and you go above beyond in the areas that matter. Then lifestyle creep to me it should just be a byproduct of just because you want to do it. But that's for me though.
Yeah, man, that's a good point, man. And I think what's interesting about that is I think a lot of people don't realize, you know how good it feels to be able to do what you want. It's one thing about looking at, but you know how good it feels to say, you know what, I think we can go out to California this weekend just cause. So people people should be thinking more about really the feeling of being able to do what you want versus trying to fake it for other people. Because the truth is, people don't really care anyway if you got money or not. They just don't. I mean, maybe some people do, but if they're worried about that, then you shouldn't even be trying to get down with them like that. Honestly, if they're just worried about your money. So, man, I think you make a great. I think you make a great point. Shout out to Von Bryant as well. Let's see, he's got a comment here. I do want to touch on real quick what Facts and the Uncomfortable Truth with Bernard S. And I know people like that where me and Tim live. So I'm sure he's in the DMV area, I would assume, or in Virginia, or yeah, in that area, making that 200,000 a year, and they struggle to ask. And he's saying ask you about it, which is just, yeah, that's crazy. But I definitely believe it because, it doesn't matter how much people make. It's all about their habits, right? It's just habits, right? And also, you start to get up in those areas, it is more expensive, right? So that's something as well. And look, there's a concept that people don't even use. Look, people are like, well, I'm gonna live where I want to live. That's cool. But me, I would move. Back in the day, I would move. If I could get a $15,000 bump, and yet I could, whether you want to say rent or mortgage, I could spend, I'm gonna get a $15,000 bump, but save 1,000 a month. Yep, I'm out. I'm out. I'll learn to love the place I'm at. Now I'm not just going anywhere, but that was part of the reason I wanted to be in Atlanta. Also, I knew the cost of living was favorable. I knew I could get home fairly quickly to go see my mom. And it was just and I lived in Maryland. From Virginia. I lived in Maryland. But I liked Atlanta and other things that came with it as well. I went to school in the South, so I was accustomed to it. But just looking at that, I actually did get a bump of, I want to say it's probably 10,000 at the time, but my rent went down by I had a nicer place that was about 800 cheaper. I'm out. I mean, it's just real easy for me. So but some of that you want to do at an earlier age, right? You want to make those decisions at an earlier age. It does get harder to move, obviously, certainly if you have kids and things like that. So that's things to talk about. But I think something real important that I do want people to take home with them is any of the topics that we talk about on here. Certainly for those of you all that have kids, if you're not talking to them about this stuff, you're doing your own kids a disservice. because the main thing should be to keep them from suffering some of the things you did, right? So we really have to, I think we have to take hold and we really have to take hold and make sure that we're teaching them while they're young, because if you can set those habits in place while they're young, it just becomes the norm to do what's best for you. But you got to learn that early on. So wanted to point that out. Von Bryant says, at H.I.M E, I have a new business. I have an LLC, an EIN number. I will definitely need some advice from you, uh, my brother. So he definitely says that. Once again, shout out to Vaughn. On that. Something else. Let's see. Let's see what Peter Investor M says. Between higher interest rate versus inflation, which one can change or affect more? So he's saying between the higher interest rate versus inflation. Well, I think inflation to me, if you guys don't mind, my take on this is inflation to me, it's a lot harder to get the truth, what real inflation is, because the same way that they continue to say, are we in a recession? And it's like, guys, we know the definition of a recession. We have been in one. Why are we trying to change the term, right? They always says like consecutive quarters. What are we talking about? So I think for that, to me, I do think I think they both matter, but to me, the bigger one, that the interest rate, to me, although I'm not necessarily concerned about the interest rate myself, I would be more concerned about that. The reason why, and part of that's my lifestyle, right? But it's just because, on a grand scale of things, people weren't living the way that they should have been already, right? Now you take it and you look at what the interest rate has done, and I'm just talking to the average person in the ability to get a home now. That's why that's a bigger concern for me, because the inflation allows you to really shift. Inflation will allow you to shift everything else around to figure out what you can cut out, what you can do to make it work, right? But when we're talking about the interest rate on a home, and a home that now, we're talking about mortgages at one point where it would have been 2,000 or now like 4,500, 5,000. The interest rate, just knowing that for me, I know the average person would be struggling to get a nice house now. I know they are. And if they say they're not, they're lying, because it's just, you could see those numbers go up. So for me, it's the interest rate. And I just want to be clear, because earlier I said, I'm not really concerned about the interest rate. Well, I'm not for myself, right? In terms of, so it's just a little bit different, but across the board, I have to be honest that, yeah, I think for the average American, it's definitely, it's definitely a problem. And also my current interest rate is locked in at under 3, right? So, but even when buying one, all the equity there, I could use the equity if I wanted to swing, have the higher interest rate, but use it to literally pay the home half off up front, right? So there's just different, it's not that simple, but I have to go with the interest rate for me. What do you guys think? What about you, Sim?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that we're not talking about is, with the interest rate, you can actually buy it down too, right? Like the more money that you put down, you can actually buy yourself into a better rate.
Yeah, you can.
And that's the perk and that's the benefit that comes with being prepared and being in a good financial position. But if you're running, at the skin of your teeth, you don't have that liberty for you to choose whether to ride in the ambulance or to get somebody to drive you fast, lights flashing on the way to the hospital, and that's just the difference. And I think it's a really true, it's a true metric to really consider, because like not only buying it down, but you also have the opportunity to potentially refinance in the event that the economy turns around and the situation becomes better than what it is. The interest rate is one that we might feel like we're relegated to it, but you can buy the position down, depending upon how much money that you have, and you can also potentially refinance it in good times. Because if we're really being honest, the people who were in the sweetest spot when these rates were down to the twos and the threes were people who were refinancing a house that they already were in possession of, and all they were doing is just getting into a sweeter spot. Not necessarily the people who were just buying houses that had the inflated price in addition to a very, very low interest rate. So, in my opinion, those were the people who were in the sweetest spot. What do you guys think?
That definitely makes sense. Hold up. Hold up 1 second. We got a friend of the show that's joining. Let me bring him up real quick. Shout out, man. How's it going?
Yo, how is it going, guys? It's been a while. But I'm happy to see you guys online today. It's been so long we haven't seen each other. So, what's up, Tim? What's up, Simsia, Perry?
What's going on, Wealth Engineering?
We're here.
So I want to stop the show, you all. We got Wealth Engineering in the building. I want to always say shout out to Wealth Engineering because he was the first person that reached out and allowed me to do a collaboration. So I'm always going to let you know, thank you, because you was the first one that allowed me to get halfway decent on YouTube.
The honor is mine. You're the first millionaire I interviewed.
So I also want to say that we knew you were coming up because anytime I always hear the word fiat, I know you somewhere lurking.
Absolutely, man. Good to see you, man. Go ahead, man. Introduce yourself and tell them about your channel, man. I definitely think that's important, man. Let them know what you do, man.
Oh, very quickly. So my name is JC. I go by Wealth Engineering on YouTube. Basically, I founded Wealth Engineering as an online school to help millennials my age learn how to trade, learn how to invest, and also not just trade and invest on a short term, but think of it as a long term and basically trying to build wealth. Because when you're trying to trade or invest, what's the purpose behind it? Is to acquire wealth. And that's definitely a philosophy that I adopted earlier, like maybe I would say 5 years ago. And then since then, it's been working for me. And I've been basically teaching other peoples along the way. And I enjoy making content. So that's basically what my channel is about. For 2023, however, I had to change strategy for different reasons, YouTube's in general, but also in my personal life. There has been a lot of changes. As you can see, it's a new studio. So there's a bunch of changes that's been happening lately. So that's why I took a break. But I'm always happy to support you guys however I can and enjoy the great conversation you guys have there. And that topic alone got my attention. As soon as I saw my notification turn on, I was like, shout out to you guys. I got to show support. And then I've been on since I saw it. So thank you for inviting me, guys.
Absolutely, man. Always good to have you, man. Tell me what you think about are you surprised that basically a third of individuals making 150,000 are living check to check?
Not at all. And this is something that will get worse. This is a trend that will get worse as we're getting a higher interest rate, as we're getting higher inflation numbers. And the inflation are not necessarily higher compared to what we saw last year, but it's been high for a very long time. It's been close to 5-6 for a very long time, and now we're starting to see the effects of that. And I want to give a shout out to the chat, but especially Peter Investor M, because that question he asked you earlier was a great question. And again, Peter Investor M is always that guy that's giving us thought provoking questions, and I love that about him. And this is a great way to a segue to that topic too. So basically, this happened in my family like over 10 years ago, where someone in my family was making above 100K, was a doctor, and it was living paycheck to paycheck. So this is something that that's one of the reasons why I founded Wealth Engineering, is literally to avoid that. And there's many factors that can contribute to that, especially in a Black community, because you can have a Black tax, Someone's making 100K may not necessarily want to live that high class life, but that you might be that only one in your family that's making that number. So everyone else in your family might want to get some money out of you. That's what happened in my own family. Some also, what the main thing about that is most people are not financially educated. Usually when you have people making 100K and up, they have a great professional life. They could be engineers, they could be software engineers. I know a lot of software engineers making that number, but they're not necessarily educated with their financials and how to handle that and how to manage it and how to plan ahead from it, right? So because of that, they end up with a lot of debts. They probably, the first instinct is to increase their lifestyle, increase their living expenses, end up not having too much. And when you have a scenario where you have a high interest rate, and then your mortgage is getting up, then you're getting caught that way, right? There's so many reasons why um, people are living paycheck to paycheck, even when they're making that salary. And in today's era, in the States as well as Canada, someone who's making 150K should not be living paycheck to paycheck. So it's a lack of planning, it's a lack of education that's causing this, and a lot of self control as well. But with that said, I want to give back to that comment. What's making the bigger change? Is it inflation, higher inflation, or higher interest rate? I just want to add to what you guys were saying to say that it's the higher inflation that pushed the higher interest rate. The interest rate is there to fight the inflation, right? So maybe the higher interest rate will give you that more rough impact that you can feel in your gut, but the higher inflation is kind of like sneaky. It's there, you don't see it every day, you don't feel it every day, but by the time you realize it, it's too late. If you haven't planned ahead to buy assets like real estate, for example, that can grow over time, then you caught right-handed and you have no money to start investing with your down payment because the interest rate is too high. The banks are too restrictive in how they approach you and how they evaluate you for a candidate to give you a loan. So it's a very, they are both important, and to me, it really depends on what are we defining about changes. But the higher inflation will give more change, but the higher interest rate will give you the change that you can see, the what you can feel, right? What feels worse is the higher interest rate, but what led to that is the higher inflation. And the higher inflation is not increasing the interest rate, it's also increasing everything else, right? Your living expenses, gas, electricity, energy, everything goes up. So it definitely, and if your income is not increasing while your living expenses increase, it's a recipe for living paycheck to paycheck. With that, I'll leave you. I want to hear your comment about that.
Yeah, I actually, so I do agree with you on that. So I feel like interest rate, I was more so speaking short term, but yeah, definitely, inflation is the bigger problem long term. There's no, I mean, because it's always going up. We will see lower interest rates likely, and it'll go up and go down. Like for example, the 80s, right, where they had it in the teens, but then we get down to 2%. What hasn't changed is that the inflation has continued and will continue to go up, and that's why everyone's like, man, back in the day, I could get this for this much. Well, you're going to be saying it worse and worse as time goes on. So definitely. And that's why, like you said, if you don't invest, anyone not investing is getting hit over the head with that, is getting hit over the head with the inflation at all times. Right. But many people own their home already. So the interest rate doesn't mean anything to them. So yeah, I think you make a great point with that for sure.
I want to add to that because wealth is dead on. I think we have to remember interest rates is almost like a byproduct of inflation. And the reason why is because I like to say is inflation to me is like the nickel and dime. I'm going to nickel and dime you to death till you realize that that dollar that you had, you only really can spend 25 cents because I'm charging you these small nominal fees, inside of all the goods and services that you do, that before you know it, you realize that that dollar don't carry you that far. But I say that the thing we can change is inflation, but we have to slow down our spending, which when once we slow down spending, it's going to affect interest rates. See, the challenge is, I think as a whole, the American people don't understand their true influence. I like to say inflation is just like the equities market. If we stop investing, then something happens. Or if we go pull our money out, something happens. Well, as consumers, if we stop spending, then something happens. Now, what end up happening in this case is it's just going to be a direct byproduct. If we stop spending as much, it's not going to be inflation we're going to slow down. We're going to slow down the interest rates. And I think that's the key, because now it's going to allow us to be able to borrow money cheaper. But as long as we keep pumping money into the market, when the market is when inflation is something we can't control, then that's what allows the inflation and interest rate to continue to rise. So I think that we have to understand, what can we control? Well, we can control our spending. We still, even in this current economic times with high interest rates and things like that, you still have people buying homes that's not willing to wait until things shift where they can get a benefit. They just so impatient that they have to be in the house, so they're still willing to overpay and then hope it work out in the end. The problem is they didn't factor in, though, it's going to be harder for them to refinance when you already overextended at the initial transaction. And I think that's the part that we tend to miss. So what ends up happening, inflation still is going to go up, but because so many people overextended, then rates are going to come down. And then what's going to end up happening, it's going to allow people that's prepared to take advantage of that. So now they can get the best of all worlds as it relates to assets, as it relates to leveraging debt, as it relates to investing in the equities market, as it relates to investing in alternative investments.
Well,
see, I think,
go ahead. Go ahead, finish the statement.
So I think that that's something we really got to pay attention to, because we can help influence the outcome for interest rates depending on what we do as how we handle and do our daily operations with inflation.
Yeah, but I think the statement that Peter Investor M was asking us is, which one can we affect more, the interest rate or the inflation? I mean, how much can we really do about inflation by itself? I mean, I think that it's just like Tim said, it's a tax for our money, and it's something that's really imposed upon us, but there's not really much that we can do about it. In the process of being prepared, yeah, we're in a position to potentially wait longer, and we're in a position to potentially buy down our interest rate. I believe myself that we are most apt to put ourselves in a better position by being able to buy down our interest, or being able to qualify for a better opportunity further down the road. Now, I want to pose something to you guys. There was something interesting that you just made me think about, Tim, when you were just speaking a second ago. This past weekend, so we had the Parade of Homes here this past weekend, right? And a house that I saw a week before, 2 weeks ago, right? That's $3.3 million. It was under contract. And then another house that was $2.9 million was also had been under contract for 3 weeks. And then I checked out this house that was 7 million, whatever. And it was crazy. A lot of people there. I say all that to say this. Is the conversation that we're having based on communities that are not well-to-do, that are not amongst the most desirable of areas to live in? Can we say that in a nice area where they have a great school in the neighborhood, that people are not fighting for them to be involved or for them to live in that community. All those houses seeing a decline in prices and valuation, or they seeing maybe like some slower transaction rates where it's not the transaction is not happening as fast, but it's still happening nonetheless. Because in looking at it and just seeing people who are still moving on $3 million transactions, if it's in a nice area and you could almost guarantee that you're going to see appreciation and valuation, are you really losing? If you're buying a $3 million house, I mean, last October, I was looking at a house that was 3.3, not for myself, but this whole Parade of Homes open house thing. And that same house sold this March for $4.6 million. So are we saying that that person overbought? In my mind, they still bought in a great area. So they're still going to be able to get a return on their investment because they bought well.
Well, I would say you're taking, that's almost like comparing the wealthy to the average working class. I think that, somebody that's buying a $3 million home, then that tells me then 9 times out of 10, they probably have the infrastructure to support that mortgage. They probably have the infrastructure or a plan for what they're going to do with their home, whether that be, I'm going to keep it for a little while, refinance, then sell. So I think that's one part of that equation. I think the next part is when you talk about just that, your standard community, because the average home price now is between 350 to 400,000. When we talk about those homes, see, that's where the challenge come in, because if you talk about two working people, husband and wife, see, that's a more dangerous scenario, because if that income stops, now the household falls apart. So I think when you talk about that, that's why still buying right now, you have to be careful, because you can end up overpaying, and one shift in interest rate or inflation can eat you alive. So then what ends up happening in that scenario, the people that's prepared, or the person that bought the $3 million home, they'll be the one going and buying their property and keeping it, and then they'll go sell it to somebody else that can afford it. But what they traditionally do is they'll get somebody in there that's qualified, and then if they can't stay there, they're just going to find someone else. So I think you got two different things going on in that equation, because I think this is one of those areas where the people that's buying, that has strategy, they're still going to buy because they still can identify deals that make sense, because they still have the resources to support deals that make sense, even in a high interest rate environment. However, the people that the average working class, they just don't have that type of resources and that type of bounce back if one thing go wrong. And I think that's the two things we just got to make sure we don't blur those lines. But that's a great point, because the elites are still going to buy. The elites going to still be able to take advantage of opportunity. Because here's the key thing: even if you buy a $3 million home right now at 11% interest rate, what you do know is, because you can afford it, you're going to hold it, and then you know that if anything change, you can still dump it, or you can refinance it, because you're never going to be cut close, or you never went in already in the red. But your average working class going into a $400,000 home, making $80,000 between husband and wife, see, they started in the red, so they will never be able to refinance. They're going to always be on the edge.
Yeah. And for me, it's just eye-opening, right? Because you start to see a completely different world. And not only are you having that exposure, but you're just seeing, man, these people are not living the same. They don't have the same concerns at all. And they'll almost never have to worry about, oh, is my house value going to go down? No, your house value is not going to go down, because your neighbors are paying for the school. And the school's being well funded, so there's going to continue to be a supply of people who want to be here,
Yeah, but let me say this too. That, by the way, that's what my whole thing with this whole side hustle gig economy thing is look, man, to me, it's okay if it's extra and above, but you're going to buy something that you're going to stake 30-year mortgage or 15-year mortgage on what I can do from day to day or week to week. It's crazy. And a lot of it goes into what's your career path, right? Like, of course, the wealthy, that's no issue because, usually business owners, right? There's a continuation of plans to be able to support that. Like you said, the economy around it, but people know in general if their career path is stable or not. Right. And that's why I think it comes down to those hard decisions to be made. That's why also, my lifestyle, I've always kept my lifestyle to a point of comfort. Now, I have the things that I like and want, but in general, it's like we always say, leave yourself an out. I always got to have it out. That's why many in real estate investment will teach just get the property, just own it, do whatever you can to get it. But when times get tough, you might be in something you can't get out of without taking a hit. So you just got to be careful about how you acquire, how you do get things. I want to say shout out to the lead attorney. The lead attorney is obviously always a big supporter of our content as well. So we definitely appreciate that, man. He's doing big things on his channel. I think everybody here probably knows that, man. So I've been watching Lead Attorney for a long time. I always like to see the success he's having. Not to mention the stuff he talks about. I'm glad to see. I noticed the other day a lot of the stuff he talks about on the marriage side of things. I'm glad to see that that's growing because he'd do content and then forever it seemed like when it comes to marriage questions, people the interest didn't, just based on the numbers, didn't seem to be there. And that's really important. So it was cool. I looked the other day, I think I saw a video of his had like 10,000. It's just question and answers. So I think that's real important. And we were speaking early, right? We're speaking about finance. Well, there's a lot you could probably pick up from the lead attorney that for those, whether you're in debt or not in debt, trying to keep the money that you get. So there's probably there's a lot of good that he has to offer, man. And we always appreciate anytime he drops by and I always enjoy checking out his stuff as well. So, yeah, absolutely. I do think that I do think there's different ways of looking at it, but I think that's something to remember is that in the grand scheme of things, everyone is at a different place, right? You can move back to where I'm from and drop now the issue obviously when you move right to a place where you can get a home that's cheaper, well, if you're not working online, you also give up that income. So that's part of it. You don't have as many options. But in general, because I work in transportation, I could find a job making because there's people that I worked with at my last job that worked in the area where I'm from, making as much as me or more, right? They were back home. So you can make 6 figures back home and you can also downsize on the house and stuff like that. So there's a difference. It's all about where you live. All of this, there's so many factors that you have to take into consideration. But in the grand scheme of things do seem to be getting worse. They seem to be going downhill rather than getting better. And unfortunately, if you think about it, as long as we've been talking, things have continued to been since we've been talking, right? Have really been going. I would say we started when things were still looking really, really up, but they're starting to. But no, they weren't actually, because we were talking about really. I think originally we were talking about all the money printing, and we were anticipating what was going to happen, and now we're steadily going into, it's like a train going through a tunnel. Now we're tunneling through what we were talking about. So yeah. So I want to point that out.
Yeah, man. Salute to the lead. Listen, there's plenty of times I quote the lead. I put lead on to my son, my nephew, my brother. Listen, check out the lead attorney's channel, especially for young men, because he's gonna tell you, listen, if you want equality, you need to get equal outcome. You need to apply equal pressure, you know, whether it be men or women. There's no showing grace based upon your sex over there. You know what I mean? And I really appreciate it. I think it's really helpful, and I think you can contribute. I think in watching his channel, you can see that he's been on both sides. He's been the guy representing the wife and the guy representing the husband. And over time, you start to see like a pattern, and you start to say, okay, well, like I see there's a lack of participation on the account of men because they're not having an opportunity to really get what they're supposed to get, you know, because the system is unfair and what have you. And I really like what he preaches to everyone about get a prenup, get a prenup. You can protect yourself by having a prenup. You won't be going into the situation so scared. And so I really appreciate it. I'm in his mastermind. He's giving us the game, you know, and he'll talk to us and hold us accountable, and really just having somebody who's that high in the YouTube game and who has the mindset that he has, it's invaluable.
Hey, something else I do want to mention that I really appreciate about lead attorney is, you know, because as someone who is married, right, I hear, look, for those who think married, you should never get married, I have no problem with it, whatever. I'm not trying to convince anybody of anything, you know, but I do like that the lead attorney has seen it all pretty much, but he's mentioned several times that he would potentially get married again, or also he's mentioned that, you know, why is it that we look at with anything else, we'll work a job for 10 years and we'll move on somewhere else and not consider it an absolute failure, but we'll get married and it can be 10 great years and we say it's an absolute failure. And, you know, I sit back quiet because I have nothing to prove, but I like that he is coming with, like you said, it doesn't seem to be one-sided, and that's from someone who's seen it all. So also, as I do see all this talk, right, because everybody is making all this money, everybody on YouTube's rich. What I really know is, because I work and my wife works, I know that half the ones hating that they don't even stand a chance when it comes to net worth and stuff, because we both work and we both do really well. So, you know, there's positives in it as well. I just don't have the energy or the time to. I'm not a marriage crusader, and I'm also not the type to try to push something down someone's throat, because all the thing about it is me. I'm cut out for marriage. I mean, I could go back 10, 15 years, the type of person I am. Everybody's not that type of person, right? So I don't try to preach that or push that on people, but I do like that lead attorney seems to be open to the good and bad on both sides. And I like having a realistic conversation with someone who actually knows what the hell they're talking about, not just random people who are claiming to know everything and ain't even had a girlfriend before. But anyway, but yeah, salute to TLA for real. I always enjoy his content. He's good at what he does, man. So I really appreciate that. Really appreciate it. Where do we go?
The lead, salute.
Where do we go from here, guys? Where next? What's next? You know, with all that's happening.
I had a question for you guys. Well, basically, what would be your advice for someone who's making 150K and more and living paycheck to paycheck? So, what are some actions they can take now, knowing that we're heading towards higher interest rate, higher inflation? What can someone in that situation do to get out of paycheck to paycheck?
Yeah, you gotta. I think you gotta first establish where you're at. Like, you know, the first thing I say, make a budget. You got to find out where everything's going. Like, what do I actually have? What's coming in? Where's everything going? So I would say budget first. And I would say look to someone, you know, like it could be Dave Ramsey. It doesn't have to be him. It could be other people, to at least establish maybe a foundation on how you start to get out of that, how you start to reduce that and things like that. Is where I think that's where I think you start. And you start to look at what can you shed really quickly. Like, what can I shed to get this back in order? So that's why I think the Dave Ramsey or whoever part is very important to have like a, there's different theories on whether it's the debt snowball, pay the highest one first, pay the lowest one. But I don't think that's the thing as much as first knowing where you're at, knowing where you're at and how deep into it are you? Because I think many people will find out, yo, I just need to stop using Uber Eats every day, 4 times a day, and I can kind of get this thing back in line. So knowing that that's your problem versus got medical bills, student loans, just knowing those things. Should I downsize and things like that? So I think it's just budget first is the first thing.
Yeah, I'm in the same conversation. You can't manage what you don't measure, and there's no way you can improve something that you have not really taken account of. And it's really important. And the first thing is really admitting that you don't know it, right? And you have to just be one with that. And then you have to be open to developing the mentality and the mindset that puts you in position. It could be everything from audio books that teach you the game about how money works. It could be Rich Dad, Poor Dad. It could be Dave Ramsey, watching his show on YouTube and just paying attention to the questions that he's asking, how he cuts down someone's situation or the questions that he poses or asks. I was even watching the lead attorney when he was talking to somebody. I could see the series of questions that he asks to understand the seriousness that someone has towards marriage. Like, why do you want to get married? Like, what is it that's really wanting you to get married? And I think that in being able to know the questions to ask, you're going to be able to assess your situation and say, hey, okay, this is the desired outcome, and this is the way by which I could go about attaining it.
Absolutely. I think Sim and Wealth summed it up well. I would say that the biggest thing, the biggest hurdle before they could do anything, any actual application is, I think they just got to accept their humility. I think they really got to understand that, hey, I did this wrong. I don't have the outcome that I'm looking for. And I think once they do that, if they fully accept that part, I think they can easily get out their situation, because once they, find a Dave Ramsey, find the right mentor, whatever the case may be, they off to the races, because they already got the fundamental part. To make that type of income, they had to have some level of skills. So that's not an issue. It's just a matter of now accepting the humility, and then be willing to take a step back, be willing to downsize, be willing to sell the expensive car with the $1,000 car payment. They gotta have to be willing to, accept the setback to get a big come up. And if they don't do that first, I mean, they can listen to all the Dave Ramsey, they can read all the books. They just never going to be there, because they're going to be in too much internal conflict in their head. So I think, because you got to know, when you make that type of income, and you live in paycheck to paycheck, that means that they probably have a lot of things. And they got to be willing to let some of those things go. They have to be willing to, I like to say, go back to doing some of the grunt work. What do I mean by that? They have to be willing to sell some of them, those material things that's not creating or adding to their bottom line. They need to be able to understand that they don't know. But then they got to do something.
Absolutely. Take action.
Yeah.
Take action.
I like your guys' questions. I like your answers. I agree with a lot of what you say, and just like pretty much said Tim and Perry, like the mindset, right? It's basically you have to mindset. So when I think about this question, the way I approach it is, it depends on what age you are, because many people that I know that were between 25 and 33, making 6 figures and up, then it's not like they had their family yet. Most of them were single, so their approach was like, let me try to get that fancy lifestyle. And especially with these women's out there looking for 6-figure men. So they definitely want to show that they have this lifestyle, right? And surprising, a lot of them end up living paycheck to paycheck just because they want to maintain that lifestyle. And then and that happened to me actually, where you get into a vicious cycle where you realize that you have to step down because you're like, man, I'm barely going by with this paycheck to paycheck. But because you got so used to that lifestyle and how people saw you that way, then you're like, that slows you down into making the right decision. And that makes the problem even worse. So, one thing that helped me go through that, and if that's someone listen to this that goes through the same situation, then that definitely would be my advice to them, would be think about it in a whole different way. Think of it as what can you acquire of value and plan ahead that way. And once you put your mindset towards acquiring something that's gonna make you look more than a boss, an actual boss maybe, then it's easier for you to accept that you have to make certain sacrifice right now towards a bigger future moving forward. And like I'll give you an example. This last year I started thinking about that, looking for business to buy, and this year I've been looking heavily on that. But that's something I'm doing right now, for example, where I'm looking at different businesses to buy. And when we were looking at we were talking about the high interest real estate market, but what's been happening also is the commercial market. It's been really impacted by what's going on right now. And when you add that with a lot of baby boomers retiring, looking for people to sell their business and not finding any buyers, anyone with any cash down, they're willing to bring their business down to making great deals with you, like deals where you basically become they become the bank and financing you and making using the profit of the business to pay the down payment. So there are so many different things that you can do, but just to think of it this way: if you're thinking of, oh, I'm gonna buy a business and then either run it, hire employees to run it for me while I do my jobs, and that my business would be something that can generate more income for me, then it's a better way to actually be a boss instead of using your paycheck from your job to make you look like a boss. And that's definitely would be my advice. And right now, especially in this market, and the next, I would say up until 2030, there will be the commercial real estate and business acquisition is definitely a great thing to do. And someone who's making 150K can definitely have a great profile to make their first investment with the bank. And so definitely I would look into something like that for them.
Yeah, great point. Great point. So we'll wrap it up, but what's next? What's next as far as as far as let's say 3 6 months out? Does this let's just say 3 months, 6 months, a year? Um, does this just continue to get worse? I think we got to already know that, but
Absolutely.
yeah. Or so yeah, I think we kind of know that. So beyond that, when do you guys see um things start to turn around for the average, we'll say the average Joe, if you think it will? Is there do you think we see an upward period again? Just like, you could say around 2015, 16, we started to see things. Now, a lot of that was driven by real estate, but just in general, or when do you see things turn around? I'll start with you, Wealth.
Me, in the short term, I don't see it turning well. Again, I might be wrong, right? I might be wrong, but definitely the next 2 years, not at all. My projections right now is 2030 and up. I would say, and Ray Dalio says it right. We're going to have a decade of basically thing going sideways. We can start off seeing the trend already in the stock market, and I think this trend is going to continue and it reflect itself throughout the economy. And that's basically all the indication that I'm seeing right now with the interest rate, with inflation going up. That's what it feels like to me. So based on that, I'm making plans accordingly so that I can still profit from these situation. But I have to be honest, I had to change my plans, my initial plans, because I didn't see it getting this bad that fast, right? But once I realized, once I realized 2021, when 40% of all the U.S. Currency in circulation was printed in just 1 year, I just knew that it was going to get bad, and this is what we're starting to see right now. I think next year, 2024, especially end of Q2, we're going to see the economy worldwide will be affected. Like, based on what I'm seeing right now, there's a lot of things happening in Europe, Great Britain, China. You mentioned China earlier. Like, they're trying to save face, but their economy is in really bad shape. Now you have like this social political war happening, increasing the pressure to more spending. And right now, the big countries like Canada and US do not need any excuse to have more spending, but somehow the excuse is there to have more spending. So it's definitely not looking good. And this war that's just started 2 days ago, it's not a good news at all for us. So I don't see it in a short term becoming better for the average American or Canadian, the average people. In they're gonna feel the wrath of inflation more and more. When you add that with higher interest rate, um, in some cases, it might be better to rent than buy in some cities. I know that sounds atrocious, but I'm feeling some people right now that had a locked in interest rate for 3 years that bought at 2020 in 2023. They're already looking like their rent is increasing by a lot, like $800 a month. So that's crazy for the average people to handle, especially when you have over 50% people living paycheck to paycheck. So I would say buckle up, people. Definitely do your research, make a plan, and we have a scenario where, regardless of what happened in the industry that or the economy, you're still safe. You're still able to generate incomes. At the end of the day, some industries will always be working regardless of if how the economy works. And if you can own a business that generates income in those situations, then it's definitely a great move. But other than that, buckle up, buckle up. That's all I can say.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely, man. What about you, Sim? Thoughts on
Yeah,
what's next, or when things start to to improve?
I think that I don't see it happening no sooner than the inauguration of the next term or the next president. Given that next year is going to be an election year, I see next year being a very tumultuous year with a whole bunch of backbiting and just that battle for people to try to paint themselves as being the best choice or the best option. And I second what wealth engineering is saying. The idea of going to war. I'm hearing something along the lines of like each rocket's like $160,000 or something like that, and they're already shot almost 5,000. It's a lot of money. It's a lot, and where is it really coming from? So it's a tough situation, and I think that if we do anything, you just have to assess your situation and just say, hey, listen, what can I do without, or is there some options that I could potentially participate in, or from an entertainment standpoint, that are not going to cost me a lot down the road? I think that we should just be prepared for anything, whether it be layoffs, definitely the interest rates potentially going up even higher. It's going to get worse before it gets any better. And we have to be serious. I think that this quarter, this fourth quarter right here, is probably going to be the most conservative quarter that we've had in a while, given that people are still dealing with, as the interest rate continues to skyrocket, people's credit card interest rates are just going through the roof, especially if they're not paying it off every single month. So do what you can, tighten up the belt, put yourself in a better position going into the future, be prepared for anything that could come down the road, because anything could come down the road.
Absolutely, man. Great points, man. And we will move to intentional millionaire. Give me your thoughts, intentional, on when you think we come out of this. What do you think's next? What's your thoughts?
I don't see us coming out of this. I see them what's going to end up happen. What I think is going to happen is they're going to change the way we do things. And I think this just another way to go back to a prediction from years ago that the middle class is shrinking. So I think they are really going to emphasize that as the economy, in the current state of the economy, it's going to boil down to one of two things. You're either going to be a winner or a loser. And loser not meaning you as an individual, just saying loser from the economic standpoint of, would you be able to survive, or you just going to be able to get by? And there is a difference there. So I think that I don't see it changing anytime soon. I just think they're going to foresee and change the status. For example, as you know, they did change the tax brackets. So I think things like that is going to change to accommodate for the change in the economic environment. And you on it either going to be one of two things. I just think that this is just another way to re-identify and really re-emphasize that the middle class is definitely going to be shrinking.
Absolutely, absolutely. So my thought is, yeah, I don't think we're headed. I don't think that things are going to improve anytime soon. Um, I think we've got a while. I think they're going to keep on trying to use, you know, the so-called tool belt to fix the issues, right? That and this is speaking from obviously the U.S. standpoint, but pretty much everywhere is doing it, right? They're using whatever tricks they have to try to manage inflation and things like that. And I do think some of that manipulation will help. I mean, it will, but those are always short-term things. The grand scheme of things is that we are going downhill ultimately, and we'll continue to forever. I mean, that's just. I mean, I hate to be gloom, but we went going away from the gold standard and getting on this thing of where it's all about debt. There's no way you can win with debt long term. Now, I do think we're in a society where you can certainly use debt to. I think that's probably the best way at this point, if done correctly, to maybe elevate yourself, whether through real estate investing and other methods. But ultimately, I think we're going to continue headed downward. Now, we will at some point. I think I'm going to say within probably the next presidency, at some point, start to see where things appear. They will appear once again to look like they're okay, but I don't believe they really. I don't think they really will be okay though. Ultimately, because we're still, for everything to be okay, people are going to have to start changing their personal situation. Each person is going to have to put their individual self, their individual family in a better position, and quite frankly, that would take people getting out of debt. And I just overall, I don't see people doing that the way that we see people going back to credit cards. I mean, just the thought of people literally living off of credit cards is wild to me. But that's the type of society we have now. So I think we're looking at several years from now, like I say, in the cycle of the next presidency, where we start to see the appearance that things are starting to really get back to some sense of what we saw several years back. And I still think that it could, potentially be an illusion. So I'm gonna go ahead and just real quick pull you guys all up. Any other thoughts? Anything else before we end the stream? And I do want to say thank you to each and every person that checked in on the stream. To shout out those in the those in the chat. We always appreciate the back and forth, the feedback. So shout out to each of you all. And you all have any closing thoughts, remarks, or anything?
Now that's it. I mean, you gotta got to fix your roof when it's sunny outside, and do what you can to put yourself in a better position going into the future. You know.
Absolutely. You guys have anything else?
I say you can do it. Just put your head down, accept where you are, accept that you may not be where you want to be. And I think now's a good time to reevaluate what you want to do. If you don't have the skills and your income is lacking, then you need to reevaluate some skills that you need to start to learn, adapt, or create so you can start generating another form of income. I think for the younger people that's in college right now, going to college, you should really make sure you consider that you get a marketable skill and don't waste your dollars and your time on unmarketable degrees. Um, and I think that even if you're going to decide not to go to college, you need to pick up a trade that's going to, you can be able to generate income in any economic environment. So, and then if you older and you feel like time has got away, it's never too late. KFC was started, I think, at age 65, 55, 65. I don't know. But just know that it's never too late. So for you, the good thing is if you're older, you have wisdom. So take that wisdom and utilize it and do it faster. So just realize that you don't need to know it all. Just get people around you that's younger, with energy, with endurance, that know more than you, but you help orchestrate it. That's what you need to do. So that's what I would say anybody need to do in this environment.
Absolutely. As a last word, I would say I agree with a lot of what Tim says. And as a last word, I would say when things are easy, they're easy for everyone. Just like the interest rates are low, everyone is buying a lot of places, like houses, even if they don't necessarily have the proper income to maintain that long term. But when things are hard, they're also hard for everyone. And if you're trying to get ahead, that could also slow down your competitors in a way. So, what I would say is plan ahead, try to adapt to any markets, and this is definitely something that I try to implement in my life. Change your plans. Basically, always make plans ahead, and then we change it if you have to, based on new information that you're getting. But what we can know for sure is the inflation that we're seeing and the high interest. When you when you hear Powell talking, he doesn't speak with the conviction that he's going to reduce those interest rate anytime soon. So basically, your first question is, if you're living paycheck to paycheck, is what would happen if my rent increased $500, $1,000 a month, and can you handle that? If not, what can you do instead? Is there other ways to increase your income to buy on assets that increase in value and in time, right? Again, I'll mention it again because it's something that I've been looking a lot these days. Buying cash flow business, buying cash flow business that generates a cash flow is still technically on the state, and it generates cash flow on day one, right? There is a lot of baby boomers that are begging, and it could be a boring business. It could be a business like buying a laundromat, right? Could be something as boring as this. It's easy, but it's an asset that you can have that generates income, that can operate with a certain level of autonomy where you still maintain your job. And what can you do in your current job to increase your income, right? Can you get a certification? Can you do consultation on the side, right? If you can reduce your expense while you increase your income and invest that extra income into an asset that generates you money, this is a great way to at least not just survive, but go by in the coming times. And when the wind change, you're going to be in the best scenario possible to leverage those low interests that will come in. And when the banks saw how you manage your life, your income in hard times, they're going to be more willing to give you money so that you can replicate that and increase your net worth in the good times. So with that said, make a plan and move ahead.
Absolutely, guys. I'll keep it short. One thing, yes, when KFC started, he was 62. So yeah, he was up, man. He was up there. It is never too late, man. It is never too late. So yeah, I just had a birthday earlier this week actually, and I just been reflecting on how time is just it's just going. So but yeah, my thing is I'll sum it up with this is you know, start with where you're at and get to know, really look at what you've got going on and get to the truth. You get down to the truth of what your finances look like. Um, see what you're working at with. It comes down to a budget, knowing that, know what mistakes you've made in the past, and then, find a way to implement the changes. That's the main thing. You have to apply it. Tons of people have books sitting on their shelves. They've done nothing though. So it won't change anything. So you have to do that. But definitely look, we definitely appreciate um, you all as always, just checking out the stream. We just love having these conversations about money and just trying to help anyone we can. We also always love the chat. Thank you to the chat. It's a very important part of all of our streams. So we certainly appreciate it. And we plan to be coming, with weekly content coming pretty soon. So you should see us on a consistent basis. I definitely want to take time to thank Wealth Engineering for coming up. We definitely appreciate him. Hadn't seen him in a while, so definitely glad to see him. Intentional Millionaire, of course, also H.I.M.E, and we appreciate you all, and we will see you next time.